Africa to me is an amazing place. It's amazing because it's vibrant and it's entrepreneurial. It's one of the most entrepreneurial places, but it's not connected. It's invented some amazing things. It's come up with some amazing new ways of working. So if you look at the pay-as-you-go SIM, when you go to another country, I think, who here buys pay-as-you-go SIMs when you go? Yeah, most of you, okay. You don't use a Vodafone SIM when you turn up in another location and pay £700 for the privilege. You buy one for like $5. That's an African technology invention, innovation working there on the ground. And to me, the most exciting thing about Africa will be as Africa moves to light up and become vibrant with technology. So I'm going to cover some of those issues. If you want to tweet me or connect with me, there's the various kind of details. But before we jump into Africa, let's talk about the connected world, because really, we often talk about the developing world and the developed economies of the West, etc. To me, the conversation is more around the connected world and the non-connected world. And as we look at the connected world, there's 5 big themes that are happening out there in the world, in Europe, in the Americas, in large parts of Asia. And these 5 big things, the first one is wiring everything up. So we call it the Internet of Things, but it's really smart buildings, smart homes, putting chips into animals, putting chips on people, wearable devices, measuring your heart rate. Who has a Fitbit or some kind of step monitoring? Yeah, quite a few of you here. Health is a really interesting area in terms of connecting that all up. You get on the scales in the morning, you measure your weight. It measures the number of steps. It measures your heart rate throughout the day. All of these kind of connected things for people, buildings, cities, and things as well. So that's a huge area of development in the West. And that's a huge area of development in places like China as well, as they start to build cities from the ground up. Another big area of development here is kind of the way the social context is changing. So the fact that actually our friends on networks online belong to us. So you probably all have a big Facebook network, a LinkedIn network. That's yours. That doesn't belong to a business that you work for. You're interacting and building a social structure online outside of business. And this is leading to a lot of consumerization of technology. Thirdly, the time and location that we work, we're globalizing rapidly. So we're working with people anywhere, at any time, in any place. The technology that we need has to be available to us, regardless of where we might happen to be. We have to be able to communicate and connect in new ways. Big data is exploding as we measure more and more data points from these connected everythings and from things like social streams. And finally, connectivity is trending in the developed connected world down to 0. So connect anything for almost 0 cost is the premise, and that's kind of where we're heading to. So that's kind of the developed connected world. Now what's happening in Africa, digital Africa? So what we see in digital Africa is that Africa doesn't have this technology legacy, and that's a huge advantage. I'm quite a glass half full sort of person. So to me, the fact that Africa hasn't got this amazing legacy of Windows XP machines installed in everybody's homes, that's a good thing. Because you know what? They can jump forward. And Africa has become this kind of mobile-first economy. It's spoken about very eloquently in the previous presentation. Huge populations of people, exploding consumer industries, growing dramatically. So with the population growing from 1.2 billion to 2 billion within the next 50 years or the next 40 years, exploding massive consumer industries, massive requirements for channels to market, for marketing vehicles, for the ability to pay for things. That's the really positive side of it. But then the technologies are not keeping pace. So all of those great things I spoke about a moment ago, when we look in Africa, we don't see all of those things. But what we do see is we see a mobile angle coming, in that the number of mobiles that are in Africa is accelerating. So the number of smartphones. People are going mobile first. Instead of going to a laptop to do things, they do it on a phone. They exchange money on a phone. They transmit money. They buy things. They communicate. They engage. And that, to me, is an amazing advantage, because here in the developed world, we're still a little behind that. I think if any of you are lucky enough to have children, or unlucky enough to have children, given that they probably cause you some difficulties, you'll note that, certainly if I look at my children, they don't use laptops anymore unless they have to. They use phones and tablets the whole time, and they're permanently connected. So our children are kind of emulating the way that Africa's connectivity has evolved. Other key things there: social, payments, health in terms of telemedicine, education, and then being able to get things up and running in the cloud. Rather than saying, I'm going to build my own data center for my particular business, it's like, why do that? Just leverage these big data centers that we've got in the cloud if you can get connected. And there has been a systemic failure to take the connectivity that we've got into Africa into homes, businesses, and into the landlocked parts of Africa. So that kind of systemic failure around technology is well documented, and it extends from network connectivity all the way out into, I think my quote here is about electricity in Nigeria's power stations at different times of the year. Obviously, they have different levels, but a lot of them are out. So big themes, big technology themes in Africa. First one is geography. So we have a lot of fiber, very fast fiber coming into Africa along the eastern coast particularly. It comes in, it then gets landlocked, and it doesn't really go anywhere. So there's a massive opportunity to create metropolitan-style Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi across cities for people to use their mobile devices to connect. We don't need to run fiber underground to all of these locations. Huge opportunities there for those coastal areas. And then we have to think about innovation and clever ways of connecting the landlocked pieces. In terms of applications and things that people use, businesses in Africa are not going to be jumping in and saying, you know what, I'm going to implement this very complicated enterprise resource planning environment to run my business on. They're using consumerized, easy-to-use apps. They're very scrappy in the way that they work. They get things done. They look at outcomes, and they're moving more to that kind of consumerized world. Mobile is the dominant platform, and what we see from all of the figures is that the Android platform is becoming the dominant platform in Africa for consumers. Innovation is needed to connect these landlocked messages, and I'll talk a little bit about that. There's an amazing opportunity in Africa to empower the millions and millions of small businesses there to grow and to trade. One of the things we see here in the West that I firmly believe will accelerate way beyond where it is right now in Africa is this extension of the long tail of businesses. So if you look at what's happening in commerce generally, then we have larger and larger organizations, very, very super large organizations, trading on either very premium products or price. And then we have a big long tail of artisan things that are purchased and built, specialist things, and that's growing all the time as more and more sort of micro businesses spring up. And if you look at the amount of the economy in the West that is based around micro businesses, it's phenomenal. All of them are pretty much moving to the web, moving to digital, selling and engaging. It's exactly what Africa has the opportunity to do. There's also a side note here, we won't get too much into it tonight, around education. The ability to educate remotely down the wire using the amazing content that is out there on the web right now, and educators from remote locations. You know, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all actually run presentations and seminars to relevant groups in Africa, you know, just using the web? There's no reason we can't do that. It's just that these things have not been set up yet. So, connection density. So, you know, how are things connected? These are all the major hubs on the planet, okay, without the land masses. So these are all the major connection points. And it maps very well to your slide. So thank you for that. We didn't speak. So these are internet connection points. As you can see with Africa, there's a lot of darkness in there. And if we look at how the fiber flows, and for those of you who aren't technicians, the way the world is wired up, our oceans have fiber running underneath the oceans that we put in during the dot-com boom. And Africa is connected around the coast, particularly down this coast here, but then also around there. And then off these coastal hubs, there are connections into East Africa. When we look over here, there is almost nothing at all. There's very, very little. So this is a huge issue. And because of this, if we look at the kind of internet penetration percentage by these regions, so I'll read some of these figures for you here. 78% in North America, 60% across Europe, Africa 11%. So the level of connectivity is phenomenally low, and it's keeping economic development down, it's keeping education down, it's keeping health down. And that's the thing that will change in the next decades as Africa kind of comes alight and becomes digitally connected. As a point of interest, what do people in Africa use? So I've pulled out here the kind of 4 of the top population size countries. So what do they use? It's different based on different countries. Interestingly, Nigeria and Egypt, the top site is Facebook in both of those economies. Google for search is top in South Africa and Kenya, and then Egypt, and google.com, the American site for Nigeria. We've got YouTube there based on the fact largely in Egypt that it's faster connectivity that they have and they can get video down it. Wikipedia, etc., and then some local sites in there. So it's very interesting looking at this, and I think the Facebook social media angle is phenomenal. So the ability to connect, communicate, share, organize, and as we saw in what we call Revolution 2.0 with the Arab Spring in Egypt, that was all driven by Facebook. All of the organization there was done by groups coming together online, using Facebook, organizing, messaging, and these technologies have really become endemic across those economies. Facebook users, phenomenal numbers of them. So Egypt, largest market in Africa, 20th worldwide, more than 13 million Egyptians regularly online on Facebook. And I don't work for Facebook, but I'm pitching this to you because I think it's phenomenal. South Africa is equally phenomenal in terms of 5 million. Morocco, Algeria. These are democratizing forces. These are technology forces that just change the way information flows. It's very difficult to shut down that kind of flow of information unless you completely turn off access to the internet and access to that digital world. So this is an amazing, amazing and inspiring thing for us, that so many people are becoming connected to share information openly and to be able to communicate freely. So landlocked connectivity, we're really interested in that. We've got all this fast connectivity coming into the coast, a little bit going inline, very, very problematic state telcos not connecting up homes, etc., or taking forever or requiring vast amounts of money to do it. So that last mile of connectivity being quite broken. But then the other big question is, how do we connect the landlocked sub-Saharan Africa, etc.? And one of the things we're working on at Google is something called Project Loon. Now, Project Loon is a series of balloons that float with the prevailing winds and have Wi-Fi repeaters on them. And then on the ground, you have little Wi-Fi repeaters connected to maybe one of the kind of banking shacks that one of the green banking shacks that you showed there. So maybe that becomes a Wi-Fi location as well. And these Wi-Fi locations can talk up to the balloons, and the balloons talk to each other, and they connect back to the global internet. So we have these currently running. The first test has been done on Loon across New Zealand, setting up base stations there in New Zealand and testing like large remote areas. This is a perfect example of something that could be done in Africa, connecting up all those super fast connections on the coast to all of the landlocked areas with balloons that can then fly around. So let's talk about mobile. What about mobile? If we look forward at the predictions and all the data that we have right now from all of the studies that have been done, what we see is a phenomenal growth in the number of connected subscribers in Africa. In some locations, there is more in some locations in Africa, there's more connections than there is people with kind of multiple connections, etc. And then an increasing range of people with fast connections, so fast wireless connections through their smartphones. And then in terms of the predictions that the telcos are working on in terms of growth in mobile voice traffic, it's roughly a doubling with the increase in people, but then a massive increase, an exponential increase in terms of mobile data as everybody wakes up and starts using more and more smartphones in Africa to purchase things, to market things, to communicate, etc. And this is a set of data on the numbers of individual handsets, the different handsets that are in Africa. And what you see here Again, this is quite small, I apologize. What you see here is that the kind of old Series 40 phones are kind of trailing off. And what's happening is these cheap Android handsets are just exploding in terms of the amount of them in the market. So a big change in the way people are communicating, and they're moving more and more to smartphones. One of the other things that we've done at Google is introduce something called Android One. Android One launched in December in South Africa on the back of this trend. And Android One is about handsets, brand new handsets for under $50 each for people in Africa, with things removed to make them cheap enough, but that are specifically engineered for a less developed technology environment and a more cost-sensitive environment rather than, traditional iPhone, which is developed more for kind of an Americanized, high-priced market. Finally, to me, Africa, I started off by saying Africa was an entrepreneurial story. It's all about people, particularly small businesses, working in their own environment and being able to go online and to be able to become digital. If we can connect them using mobile devices and maybe technologies like Loon, where we can kind of connect those big landlocked areas that don't have signals, then these businesses can do phenomenal things. The internet is a democratizing force. It allows communication. It allows ease of access for everybody. And the way that we think about this is to say, there are technologies that are up there in the cloud that everybody has access to, that allows you to create on the web, create content, create designs, to actually store things, keep them safely up there without having to have them on a hard drive somewhere which may fail and where you may lose those things, to publish them and to manage that publishing cycle, to find things that are of use for education, for research, for entertainment, to connect with other people and other things, and then to communicate. And at Google, we build technologies around these pillars that allow people to go online for their businesses, learn in education, and connect in many different ways.